Emma, it's great to have you here with us today, and welcome. You can go ahead and share your screen.
Thanks, Heather. Just wanted to confirm that that is sharing. We should be all set. Wonderful. Well, great. Go ahead.
I was just going to tell you, it all looks good.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, great to be with all of you. As Heather mentioned, my name is Emma Lown. I work for Hope International and looking forward to chatting with you all about project management. Just would encourage you to take a few moments right now to think about what is the last project you worked on. Maybe you can jot down a project or two that you are currently working on that is right now on your to-do list or that you just finished. We'll just take a minute here to think through what is the last project you worked on. Then maybe just think about, did the project have a deadline? Did that project have a due date? Was that date flexible at all, or was that an urgent deadline? Did the project have a deadline, or was it just a project that you could get done anytime on your own timeline? And finally, just for you to think about, how did you know which task is most important within the project? Did you have a priorities list? Did you have a to-do list? Did you have a manager talking to you about the most important thing on the project? Did someone tell you, or did you come up with it on your own? Was it predetermined, or did you make your priorities list as you went? Just think about, how did you know which task is most important? Well, thanks for thinking with us today. I'm looking forward to talking with you about project management and to present to you about how you can use processes to build on your relationships with coworkers to serve in growing the mission and work of your organization. So first, we're going to talk a little bit, surprisingly, about babysitting. When you babysit, you don't own the child. You are indeed asked to steward the child, to nurture the child, to watch the child while they are in your care before that child goes back to their parents or legal guardians. So I like to think of project management kind of like a babysitter. Sometimes you are a project owner and you see the value in it and you are requesting the project to be complete and also seeing it to completion. Other times you are simply being a steward of the project for a season. You don't own the project. You're instead casting vision for a team and inviting them alongside you in the journey. And then at the end of the day, when the project is complete, you hand the project back to the project owner. You submit the deliverable, you click send, you print, you click publish, whatever that looks like. So I would just encourage you to think through how project management can help differentiate between project ownership and project stewardship. Project managers are often more of a steward along the journey and sometimes don't own the project, but have a really critical role in responsibility to help nurture and steward the project while it's in their care. Also, an important differentiation with project management is people or projects. And my answer is both. Relationships matter. I would encourage you to think about, as you think about project management or even how to manage the details, how you are on the same team, as your colleagues. You are all working together towards a cohesive goal, which is serving the mission of your organization. So your goal as a project manager, or as you create systems and organization to support the function and the work, is to use a cohesive system and a smooth process to help everyone work better together. So the first step of any project management function or tool or even organizational system is to get to know your colleagues, is to build relationships. So here you'll have this in the handout, but is a few different links of different personality tests or working assessments that I would encourage you to explore with your team, with your colleagues, such as the question of the day, having a stand-up meeting to get to know one another. Maybe our teams gets together once a week on Monday mornings, and we just get to know one another and talk about our weekends before we start diving into our work together. You could also have a question of the day to get to know one another, whether that's work related or personal, just another way to kind of build that unity and collaboration. A working genius assessment, Enneagram test, Myers-Briggs personality test, or the DISC assessment are all great tools and kind of external resources that you can use. Have everyone on your team take one assessment and then have a meeting to dive in together to say, how are we alike? How are we different? And how can we leverage the skills that God has given us in order to serve Him more effectively in our work? So that brings us to step one. After you build those relationships, is to know why your role exists in relation to the mission that your organization serves. This is so key to any role. What is your personal why? What brings you to this work? What draws you to the organization you are serving in? Why do you care about the mission? And then to take that a step further, I'd encourage you to think about, how does your work tie into the work of the mission? Why is your work critical to the work that your organization does? I'd like to share with you about my why. So I work on the marketing team at Hope International, and on our advancement team that exists of the development, experience, and marketing teams, and we exist to fund the work. So in order for my job to be done well, I exist to provide systems and organization so that we can provide more tools to our development representatives, to our marketing liaisons, so that they are able to share with more constituents about our work, so that we can raise the funds to help reach more families in developing countries. We also exist as an internal creative support team. So we create pamphlets and flyers and posters and banners and all of the collateral needed digitally and print to serve the development team, our operations teams, to help brand our offices in Rwanda and other countries where we serve. We also serve on brand development, which is continuing to make sure that we are with the latest trends, colors, our font is legible, our logo is readable, brand growth, and then the advancement team creative support. So I would encourage you, as I think about my why and how the organizational systems I work with support the broader goal of funding the work that allows us to serve more families that to achieve our mission. At Hope International, our mission is to invest in the dreams of families and to proclaim and live the gospel. And so my work ties directly to the mission. I think that's a critical step of project management or any role within a nonprofit, is to think why your work matters, so that every email, every notification you receive, it helps to bring such perspective into what work you're doing and how you can do your job with excellence, how that will serve the kingdom through your organization and through what God is doing around the world. Step two is to outline a typical process for a project. So as a project manager, it is so helpful to have standards and templates for projects. So you might think through business cards is something that most organizations serve as a project, and what steps are needed for a business card. On our team, steps such as a writing, proofreading, designing the card, having the requester approve the card, sending the card to print. Those are a few steps we take for a project process. So I would encourage you to think through what steps are needed to achieve typical projects. Maybe you have quarterly projects that are always the same process. Maybe you have monthly projects that are always the same process. Where can you standardize and actually name what tasks are needed to accomplish the project? Think about those common factors that tie together so that allows you to always accomplish a project. For me at Hope, this is our project lifetime. So I'll just kind of go through this project in case that's helpful for you to hear about how we process our projects on the marketing team. And hopefully this will also serve as a guide as you think through what process you proceed through for your projects. So for us, our internal clients submit a marketing request form, which then triggers a project in Rike, that's our project management software, that notifies us that a project request has come through. After that, the project manager will reach out to the requester to learn more about the request. We define the core pieces of the project, such as the audience, the deadline, the goal of the piece, the call to action, the budget, and the content. Part of our project lifetime is then doing a project intake meeting. So receiving all of the information about the project, thinking through who needs to approve the piece before it's finalized. And then the marketing team works on the project. We have a review and approval phase where people give their feedback on the piece, make sure that everyone is pleased with the end result before we finalize it, and then we deliver the piece. And lastly, as part of our project lifetime, we also usually have a project review or debrief where we discuss what went well and what could be improved upon for the project. Here you'll see a funny picture of a playground. And I like to think of a playground as a symbol for limits. Now, why might you think are limits and a playground at all related to project management? Well, oftentimes for creative teams or even creative leaders, limits are so helpful. Now, again, you might be thinking creative is loose, is free, but I would encourage you to actually switch that narrative to think about how limits allow for creativity. When you're on a playground, you have a few children maybe playing on the playground at recess. Now, if you have a fence around the playground, the children will all run around and will explore the area. They'll play in the mulch, they'll swing on the swings, they'll go on the slide. But if you don't have a fence around the playground, children will actually, it's psychologically proven that children will actually stay closer to their guardian or parent or teacher because they don't know how far they can go. They don't feel comfortable going over to the swings because they don't know how far is too far. Maybe there's a road right past the swings and they're afraid of getting in trouble or running into the road. So if there's no fence around the playground, children will stay closer to the individual who they feel safest with. They won't explore the area because they aren't sure where their boundaries lie. However, when you have a playground with a fence, that allows the children the freedom to know exactly where those boundaries are, to know exactly where those limits are so that they can run free and wild around the playground area, knowing that they are safe and that they see those limits. The same principle applies with project management. It's so important to have those limits, such as who is the audience? What is the budget? It would not make sense to have a project, a poster designed that is a $500 poster for printing if the budget's only $100. But if we knew that the budget was $100 from the start, that allows our creative team to say what colors, what font, what style, what format will most effectively achieve the goal of sharing about the mission of our organization for this poster. But if we don't have defined a few different limits, the creative team doesn't always know what grounds to explore. So instead, I would encourage you to think through defining your fence. What do you need in order to start a project? What are some limits that you could set for your team so that you can creatively free up others to think beyond the bounds, to explore the whole grounds of the playground, so that they're able to think through all of the options? So for you, that might include a call to action. What call to action are we trying to achieve through this project? What is our budget? Those types of limits. Who will be seeing it? The audience. What color should it be? If you have specific direct feedback on those pieces of those deliverables, that will help you to define your fence so that when you have a creative team working, whether that's a photographer, a writer, a designer, even visionary leaders, having a fence around you will allow your team to explore all the grounds, all the areas, all the possibilities, all the ideas within that fence, and also allow you to effectively go together outside of the bounds to say, okay, we know that this is our limits, this is our fence, but what if we? That allows you to jump over the fence together instead of feeling like there might be some miscommunication over what is the fence, what are your limits. This also ties in to say, is there anything that all projects have in common with one another? Maybe there's a piece that you think we always have to ask this question. Let's ask it now at the start of the project so that you can more effectively carry out the deliverable later down the road. It's also really helpful for project management and having a unified function and process to think through your aligned priorities. This is another silly image that reminds me about bouldering and big rocks. At Hope International, we often use the phrase big rocks. At the start of every quarter, we define our team's top priorities. These are the big rocks that we need to accomplish. If you think about a jar, a mason jar, and you throw pebbles into the jar, maybe each pebble represents an email or a task or a phone call that you work on. You know that the more pebbles that go into the jar, the fuller the jar gets. And maybe you have a big project that you really want to accomplish. Maybe that's sending out an email newsletter. Let's call that email newsletter a big rock. But if you're not putting in that big rock, your jar will quickly get full of these pebbles, and then you won't have any room in your jar for the email newsletter, for the big rock. However, if you prioritize the email newsletter, if you name that as a big rock and you put that in your jar first, that helps you to accomplish the email newsletter, your top priorities. And then once you have that big rock in your jar, other pebbles can sit on top of it. They can fit in between the cracks between the big rock and the jar. And that allows you to accomplish your mission. That allows you to accomplish the work that you have set out to do. So that brings me to my next point. Define your roles and responsibilities. In project management, it is so helpful when you define those big rocks to also say who's the best person to accomplish these tasks, to accomplish these projects and big rocks. We have audacious goals that we have set out for ourselves. So who is the best person fit to do this work? Having big rocks defined also allows you to not allow for any mission creep. So that allows you to say your best yes to the best ideas, and then no to the not as good ideas or the good ideas. That allows you to prioritize the things that matter and allow the people who matter to those projects to effectively serve in those roles for the projects to accomplish them. In project management, you might have heard the term RACI before. If you're not familiar with this term, allow me to explain it to you. RACI stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, and Informed. This is a very helpful tool for project managers that allows you to define roles for a project. Who is responsible for seeing that this project is completed? Is that the project owner? Is that the project manager? Is that the CEO? Who is accountable to the project? Who should be consulted for the project? Who should have input in what this piece looks like? And who should be informed as the project evolves? Who needs to review the email newsletter before it's sent out? Who needs to speak into the content of the email newsletter? They would be accountable before the ones who are informed just press it, okay, just approve or deny the project. A few other questions that help you to determine the roles and responsibilities for a project. Who is the requester? Where is this project coming from? Who really is asking for the project? Is it a donor? Is it a staff member? It doesn't matter the answer as long as you have that defined so that you know that that requester is pleased with the end result. It keeps them in mind as you're creating the project, as you're drafting the email, as you're designing the pamphlet, as you're talking with other staff. That helps you to remember your why in this project is to serve this individual, is to serve this group of people. Who needs to review the project? As I mentioned, is that a CEO? Is that a staff member? Is that a donor? Who needs to speak into the project and give feedback? Who needs to approve? This is slightly different than a reviewer. An approver is simply saying yes or no to the project going out. So the project might be finalized, 5 different people spoke into the project, 5 different people looked over it to make sure that it's up to par, up to standards, and looks good, reflects the mission and the organization's work. And then maybe the CEO has a final sign off on it before it goes out. And lastly, who makes the final decisions? This is always helpful to have defined before you even start on the project, to say who is the strategy owner? Who makes the decisions? Again, that takes me back to our babysitting analogy. If you, as the project manager, are more so asked to steward the project, you might serve in an assistant role, you might serve in an operations role, in a logistics role. Anyone can serve as a project manager. So even if that's not in your job title, I would encourage you to think of yourself as a project manager. Think of yourself as stewarding a project. And if you don't have the final say when you have a dilemma or a question about the project, making sure you have defined at the beginning who is first and foremost going to be answering that, who's going to be making the decisions. Maybe that's one person, and maybe that's a group of people. Step 4, planning the process. This is, again, a critical piece of the puzzle. It doesn't matter what your role is with an organization, but I'm going to propose 2 different project management techniques to help you think through how to plan your process when you're executing a project. This is our project management system called Rike. It might look a little bit intimidating, but that's okay. This is a tool that we use. It's similar to Trello, OneNote. There are free versions available as well. And this just is a screenshot of 2 different projects that I served on recently. On the left, you'll see the waterfall process. This is where one task flows right to the next. So you'll see we need to receive the program content before we design the program, which follows with an approval, which follows to changes, which follows to proofreading. You'll see it's one step after the other. This is what we call a waterfall because it just simply flows from one task to the next. Versus on the right-hand side, you'll see an agile process. There's not as much system to this process, but it is so critical to name that it's an agile process because it keeps everyone organized. It shares deadlines, it shares process, it shares tasks. So tasks are the smallest part of a project, and then the project encompasses a lot of tasks. Tasks would live within projects, which live within folders, which maybe live within workflows or systems for your team. So this allows us to keep track of deadlines and tasks and who is responsible for each task to accomplish the work of the project, to accomplish the work of our mission, which allows us to serve more families to accomplish our work at Hope International. So the agile workflow and waterfall workflow are 2 very different styles of processes that allow us to both manage the tasks, the deadlines, and the people assigned so that we can be all held accountable to our work. This also allows for a checklist of sorts to allow each member to serve their function. This also keeps everyone organized so that everyone involved on the project is able to see their different tasks and how they can serve in this project so that they know that their giftings are being used when they're asked to serve on a specific task, to serve a specific project, to serve a specific function for your organization. And lastly, this either workflow and more. There's many more workflows possible within project management. This is just 2 that we use primarily that I'm most familiar with. But there are many, many workflows that you can use that also allows for optimal accountability. So everyone knows the deadlines and the tasks that they are responsible for. Introducing project management to your team might sound daunting. It might feel like a big task at hand. But I would encourage you to switch the narrative a little bit to thinking through change management. So as you introduce a new project management system, whether that's a new workflow, a new status, maybe even a new communication tool, I'd encourage you to think through change management. What steps do you need to take as a project manager, as an assistant, as a logistics lead, as a manager, as an employee, as a friend? What steps do you need to take to respect and help guide and shepherd your colleagues in this journey? And encourage you to take time first to listen to your team, to listen to your colleagues. What about the projects we're working on right now is working well? What about our processes and systems is working effectively? And what isn't? Be brave enough to ask the hard questions, to listen well, to take notes, and to even invite feedback from other people. Next is action planning, synthesizing those notes from all of the listening sessions and thinking through how can we pivot? How can we change our systems to effectively better work together? To boldly name your challenge. What problem are we facing? As you listen to your colleagues and team members, what challenge are you running into? What are some barriers that hold you back from working more effectively as a team? Don't be afraid to name those challenges. Also, to name improvement areas. What are areas that we can work better together? What are areas that we have problems with the systems we work with, the projects we work on, the deliverables we are sending out? Next is a plan for change. So get ready to gear up for change. And on the next slide, you'll see some helpful tools and tips for that as well. You can implement phase one of the change. So for us, that looked like recently we carried out a new workflow training that allows us to work better together through our project management system at Reich. So we implemented phase one with training and testing. We rolled that out to a small group of people, and we provided a few different avenues for them to give feedback, such as a feedback survey, one-on-one meetings with managers, and also just a panel and chat that you could always share feedback, the good and the challenging. So you'll want to test the change, a new process, whether that's a new way to send out an email, a new system, a new process for a project. Then I'd encourage you to actually pause. Even if you feel like there's some momentum with this new change, just pause. Listen again to the feedback that you've been receiving through the different channels, through a survey, through meetings. Listen and refine your process. This is a very helpful step that you can plan for ahead of time. So even as your momentum is rolling, you can pause and listen. That also shows your stakeholders and colleagues that you deeply care about their buy-in, their opinions, and how they feel about the change. And you can work to effectively work better together. Again, provide more opportunities for staff and colleagues to give feedback, revising your plan and process, and lastly, to implement the defined plan and process. As a part of change management, you'll often find that at times there are some compromising of productivity. That's okay. In order for change management to work effectively, you have to see the long-term goals as your goal. The long-term growth is more important than the short-term challenges. So here you'll see a diagram that our team has used to think about the emotional impact that staff and colleagues might face when you're introducing change. Again, whether that's a new system for technology, whether that's a new workflow for a project, whether that's even introducing a new role at times you go through change management. You're focusing on that long-term gain and maybe sacrificing some short-term challenges. It's normal to experience grief as a part of change management, to experience even different opinions, maybe even be prepared to deal with some conflict. Not everyone will see the value at first, but continuing as a leader to cast the vision of why this matters, of the long-term gain that you are seeking after, how you can work better together when you have unified processes and systems so that you are able to build on your relationships to work more effectively as a team so that you can greater serve your mission of your organization. I'd encourage you to remember what matters. Remember that relationship building matters. As you manage projects, as you manage tasks, sure, it's important work, but also your colleagues matter too. It's important that we are always speaking kindly and gently to our colleagues, and to always remember that the work we do is a product of our relationships. When we have strong relationships, we can accomplish strong work. But if we don't have our core of strong relationships, our work also might suffer. But instead, when we build off of those relationships, when we first build the relationships and let the work follow, that will increase in greater productivity and efficiency. Using a cohesive system and processes will help you to work better together. A few tools and resources that I would encourage you to check out as project managers, as people who manage projects, tasks, to-do lists, would be to utilize AI. AI is a great resource that has just leaps and bounds grown that allows us to greater serve our teams. A few examples of how you might utilize AI in your work as project managers or product specialists is to allow Chat GPT or the team's artificial intelligence bot to synthesize your meeting notes. That's a great resource that will save you tons of time, is to upload meeting notes and asking the AI bot to summarize your notes, to synthesize them for you, to even draw out the action steps. AI can also translate, yeah, as I mentioned, AI can translate the notes into action items. Our project management software that we use, Rike, it can also send you daily messages about your to-do list. And I bet Trello might also be able to do that. You'll notice that the project management, different softwares that have been growing have different AI functions within them that allow you to work better together. So I would encourage you to check out those resources as well as exploring what other resources are available to you. We often say at Hope that we want systems and processes to work for us. We don't work for the system. I would encourage you to change that narrative and to continue to ask yourself, how can I utilize better systems, better tools, better resources to help my productivity, to help my team, to help my work so that we can greater serve the kingdom? Again, continuing to keep that goal in mind that we're serving God together, that we're focused on kingdom work so we can utilize technology and new tools in society to better resource us as we accomplish our work. A few additional tools and resources and tips about to-do lists. I'd encourage you to think through the difference between a brain dump and a to-do list. Oftentimes I like to do both, and they're both serve different functions and tools for those of us with long to-do lists or long tasks at hand. A brain dump can be all of the things that need to be accomplished, your notes, your action items. So I'd encourage you, if you ever feel overwhelmed or if you have a lot of tasks at hand, to just take a blank sheet of paper and just brain dump, to open up a Word doc and just think through all of the different things that need completed. And then to create a priority to-do list, to highlight, to circle the top 5 tasks that need to be accomplished by the end of the day. This will allow you to take your brain dump into a priority to-do list so that you can most effectively serve your big rocks, to get those done first before you allow the pebbles into your work, to allow you to serve the work that's most important, most pressing, top priority work. And then you do the work that's also important, maybe less urgent. And that allows you to greater serve the mission of your organization. A colleague recently shared this tool with me, which I thought was enormously helpful, which is bullets versus boxes. Thinking through bullets in your notebook is more for meeting notes, and a box, a checkbox in your notes, is for an action item. When you're taking notes in a meeting, I'd encourage you to maybe try out this tool that allows you to think through, then when you look back at your notes, okay, what is an action item and what is a note that I can refer back to? So project management. Why should you care? You can use processes to build on your relationships with coworkers to most effectively serve the mission and work of your organization. Thanks again for allowing me to share. What questions do you have?
Awesome. Thank you, Emma, for this very informative presentation you've just done. I already have a question that's come in from Joshua. He wants to know if there are any other specific ways that you can use AI with your work team.
Yes, yes, and yes. I think this really depends on the function of your team. And so I know that for example, for my marketing team, we have a graphic design team that utilizes specific AI tools, as well as a marketing specialist and insights uses a few different AI tools. On our project management team, like I mentioned, we mostly use Chat GPT. We have a Teams AI bot as well as a Rike kind of artificial intelligence. But I would say there are multiple different tools that you can use. I've also heard of an AI tool where you can allow it to join meetings with you, and then it actively takes notes during your meeting and then emails you a report summary. I don't have the name of that tool off the top of my head, but that would be another helpful tool that I think project managers could utilize more. But there are certainly many, many AI tools that we are continuing to explore, but I would say that kind of usually differs between the function and role.
All right, we have a few other questions here. You mentioned, so George asks, you mentioned Trello a couple of times. We use Trello, but I'm curious if you consider Rike is worth taking a look. Is it better than Trello or in the free version?
Great question. I would highly recommend Rike, especially if you have a team member or team members that have capacity to learn the system. Yes, I would say Rike is a very helpful tool, especially when you have complex projects to build out. It really allows you to assign them to different team members, have deadlines, and it gives you different functions as well. So you have the list view, the table view, the Gantt chart view. That's most often what we use as project managers at Hope is the Gantt chart. But the team members that we collaborate most of the time, they use the list view, and that works great for them. And so I would say a big piece of Rike is training. So making sure that you have the time and capacity to learn the system and train your heavily users and collaborators on the system. But I would highly recommend Rike. It really allows you to build out the project management function really effectively and coordinate a lot of work in a small resource.
Great. Another question from Eric is, can we clarify the difference between responsible and accountable in RACI? They seem like the same thing to me.
Yes. So responsible is the project manager, making sure that the project gets completed, and accountable is more so someone that is held held accountable to the work. And so I would say the difference here is that the project owner is typically accountable. They're accountable for the project being completed, being finalized, and the project manager is responsible. So they're responsible for making sure that all the different creative team members in my function are assigned to the project, are working on the project. On our team, sometimes the director of marketing will request a project. So she's responsible for making sure, or she's, held accountable. Sorry. The director of marketing would be held accountable to making sure that the project is completed. And then the project manager is responsible for working with the creative team to make sure everyone is doing their task, more like carrying out their daily tasks and to-do lists. And then that goes back to the director of marketing, who's responsible for making sure that that project is completed. So there is some nuance there. They can have some overlap. They can be the same person, but they can also be a little bit different if you have multiple people. One is the project sponsor and more so the owner. They're responsible for the project being completed, and then the held accountable is the team that's working on it.
Excellent. Just a comment here. Emily mentions that she has used otter.ai
Yes,
for meeting notes. Yeah,
that's it. Yes.
I use rev.com. They have also recordings. I have another question for you. Is there a place where people can learn more about the project management systems that you talked about, waterfall and agile?
Yes. At Hope, we use eCornell courses. And so that would be a great resource that I would recommend, would be through eCornell. There's also the PMI, Project Management Institute. They have a guidebook and other resources, different webinars that I have learned more about the project management processes and workflows. Those are two places. There's also a few different books that you can read about project management that kind of outline about the different processes that I could share afterwards as well.
Awesome. Is it eCornell, like Cornell University?
Yes.
Okay. And is it eCornell dot?
I believe it's .edu.
Okay. Yeah, very good. Okay, another question for you. What's a challenge that you have experienced in your project management role, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, thanks for this question. There's always challenges with any role. One challenge that I have encountered is just dealing with conflict. At times, as a project manager, you serve as a bridge in my role from the creative team to a customer or requester. And so often that includes vision casting of sharing priorities and just yeah, helping different team members to be aligned in this mission, in this work. So I would say conflict has been a challenge and is always a challenge in working with other humans, as we are all sinners and fall short of the glory of God. And so I think that's a challenge that no one is maybe immune to. But learning, especially as a project manager, I think it's really helpful to learn about relationships matter and relationships first. And so whenever there is maybe a disagreement or missing the mark on a project, hopping on the phone, getting on a call, even video. We also use a tool called Voxer that allows us to send voice messages back and forth. And that has allowed us to more effectively work through conflict when there is a differing of opinions. Instead of seeing conflict as something discouraging, seeing it as something to run towards, as we all have different opinions, and that's what brings us together. That is how God created us, is we are all different, and we all have different skills and giftings to bring to the table. And so definitely utilizing conflict to learn more about each other, to learn more about our differences and see how that can bring us together. So using Teams to jump on a phone call, send a Voxer message, asking questions to learn more, and saying, how can we compromise? How can we work well together so that your vision matters to us as we accomplish the project, and then you feel satisfied with the end result in the project as well. So being willing to yeah, work through that to serve the relationship first, and then to see how the work is a product of that relationship.
So Jorge is following up asking, what is it, Voxer or Boxer?
Yes, I can put it in the chat. It's called
Okay,
Voxer. So like a voicemail, but you can send voicemail messages.
awesome.
And I would recommend even Voxer Pro that allows you to send more messages. But there is also a free version that's a great place to start. I had it for the first couple years, and then just recently transitioned to Voxer Pro.
That's excellent. Emma, can you post your email address in the chat as well?
Yes, of course.
People can follow up.
These are great questions. Thanks so much for following along.
And is there, you don't have any other questions, you're welcome to continue to post things. But before that, is there anything else that you've thought of as we've continued to chat that you want to share with this group?
Oh, yeah, I think the only thing that I can think of at this moment is just encouraging you to think beyond your job description. So even if you aren't a project manager, or even if you yeah, don't have any projects maybe on your list, to think through how you can leverage organizational tools, like we mentioned, a few different AI resources, to see how God might be inviting you to serve your team better. That's something that I found was an invitation to support my team in just having greater organization, and that comes with trusting yourself, to over communicate, to coordinate the details. And so I would encourage you just to yeah, trust your intuition. If you see gaps of where your organization could use organization, even if you don't have that as your job description, to maybe talk with a colleague or a manager about how you could greater serve in that capacity. I think it's allowed us to accomplish more work in a shorter amount of time, more efficiency. So just to think through how you can use the tools God has given you and the resources you have to serve in a project management function, even if that's not yeah, not part of your day-to-day work, how you might be invited to utilize those skills to serve your work.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll just read out Emma's email address so we have it for the recording. It's elown, Lown, at hopeinternational.org. And if you want to email me, mine is Heather at lemotif.org. Lemotif. Thank you. We don't have any other questions. And if you don't have anything else to share, we'll start our closing slides. Thank you very much for what you shared today, Emma. That was excellent.
Thanks, Heather. Glad to be here.
Let's end the recording now. This webinar has been recorded and will be available to Missio Nexus members on the Missio Nexus website. After the webinar, you'll be connected to an evaluation survey. Please take a minute or two to complete this. We value your input, so please fill that out. The promised handout is in the chat panel now. If you scroll up, you'll find it. Feel free to download a copy of it. Make sure you look out for our next webinar titled Leverage Your Website to Reach the Nations, which will be on search engine optimization. The webinar is scheduled for January 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern and will be presented by Cole Shiflett of an agency called Accelerate, and his work is focused on SEO. Until next time, I encourage you to consider joining the communications group, which you can find after clicking on the groups on the menu on the website, and this will enable you to connect with other people engaged in marketing and communications. Thank you also to everyone who joined and participated with us. I'm Heather Pubels, along with Mary Kay and Hannah, our production team.